Okay, you just prompted two questions. Peter Zeihan is one of them because I think he used to be with Stratford. What do you think about him? He's been interesting lately.
Has he? What's he said?
I'm curious with you because you smiled.
What can I ask? What prompted? I haven't kept up with all of the developments, so I'm just curious what prompted the.
Well, you're smiling though, and I'm a poker player. Why are you smiling?
Well, I would say I have something of a philosophical and geopolitical, and there's probably several other terms here. I have some disagreements with the way that he sees, interprets, and promotes his vision of geopolitics. I think it's hard for me to find a Peter Zeihan video that I agree with on either first principles grounds or the conclusions or the analysis. Now, look, I'm not trying to pick a beef or whatnot, but there's. I think I've seen. First of all, didn't he quit Twitter and then come back, and he seemed to be promoting, at least in some soft sense, much of the internet censorship architecture that's been laid down. I mean, I see him as a sort of regurgitation of the vomit of the Blob as a sort of private consultant that just kind of distills the jargon of foreign policy for layman speak in order to kind of get a mass of hearts and minds. And I'm not saying that's his business model, but the end result of it is it's kind of a Bill Nye the Science Guy of geopolitics.
Well, let me ask you this: is he? So does he give you vibes of CIA or no? He doesn't give you vibes of being connected, or?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, a lot of people accuse me of that as well. It's hard to actually be informed in this space without having people in that world who are a part of your network. It's a world that most civilians with a 9 to 5 and who care about football or the UFC or music or some other passion, you're either in this or you're not, or you only have a passer's chance at understanding it. And if you're doing it full time as a full time consultant or whatever his business model is, then you're obviously pros. You're obviously connected to those networks. So that doesn't mean that you are of it. And the other thing to keep in mind is that so much of it by its very nature is informal networks. So you're not necessarily.
He gets a lot of eyeballs. He gets a lot of eyeballs. Like when he does the interviews and he makes his tours. But he's not necessarily. He doesn't favor Trump, right? He's not the most pro-Telegram Pavlov guy, right? He's not the most pro-Musk guy, right? And when someone's against, let's just say Musk or Telegram, and we saw what happened with Telegram. I want to know your thoughts on that as well. I don't know. For somebody to be able to speak the way he does on so many different variety of topics, you wonder, how does he know this stuff?
You just go to the Diplomat and you just recycle whatever's on the top page. Or you read the Journal of Democracy. Go to journalofdemocracy.org, for example.
So you don't think he's that deep. You think he's shallow with the information that he has.
Listen, you're making me pick this beef. I've done it publicly, by the way. If you've seen, I've did like a little video on this before. I try not to get into these personal things. But look, and I say this sort of with a little bit of love in the sense that, everyone's trying to interpret the world of geopolitics. So I'm not trying to pick a personal thing, but I think it's actually everything that I've seen, and I'm open to being wrong on this. If someone can show me an insightful Peter Zeihan video, I will Clockwork Orange, keep my eyes open for the whole thing. I will real time do my response to it. But I have not seen anything from Peter Zeihan that I've not already seen at journalofdemocracy.org. It is just a watered down reprint of what the National Endowment for Democracy said 3 weeks ago.
Okay, so fine. Let's go back to George Friedman, okay? And George Friedman, you're talking about, he's the what? He's the, what is his position there? Founding Geopolitical, the chairman of the publishing company, Stratford, right? So he said what he said in that speech. Here's the phone. Here's the camera. Here's the internet. DARPA produced internet so we can mail things to each other faster, right? What did you want me to dissect from his message there?
That the story of Google's relationship with the U.S. military, with the Central Intelligence Agency, with the State Department, with our congealed blob of a defense, diplomacy, intelligence, foreign policy apparatus, is not some crazy story that's unique in American history. It's actually the standard default course of events of technological development in the United States, in the sense that the money in R&D usually comes pre-baked from military projects, and then it is converted to dual use where the commercial sector can upscale it, can turn it into a profit. This is one of the beating hearts of the military industrial complex, is this, it's almost $1 trillion a year that the Pentagon gets. It's one of the biggest departments in the federal government. It's the largest employer in the entire country. And it is a cheap way to get commercial technology to have the huge multinational corporations that we have in the tech space, because they don't need to do a lot of the early stage R&D as a matter of free market and have to run up all the costs on 1,000 failed attempts to develop a technology. It can be publicly subsidized by the military and then turned over to the National Science Foundation, its little civilian arm. And I only use a pejorative phrase like little because the National Science Foundation is one of those pernicious places for internet censorship. They've done in the censorship technology space the same thing as what we just saw with the cell phone, the GPS, Google search engines, and all of that, in the sense that the scan and ban language of AI censorship, the scan and ban capacities to be able to ingest 900 million tweets and then run these sophisticated keyword searches in proximal distance between different keywords in order to micro-target the narrative you want to nuke off the internet. That all started as a DARPA project. When DARPA was trying to manage the insurgency of ISIS and was concerned that ISIS was recruiting on Twitter and Facebook, and so they spent hundreds of millions of dollars developing AI keyword scan and ban technology. And then when Trump won the 2016 election, the National Science Foundation basically took that over. They turned it into a civilian free market of censorship technology, and then no less than the State Department's policy planning staff, color revolution guru Jared Cohen moved over to Google Jigsaw to create basically the world's first AI censorship retail product, which catapulted us into the world we now live in, where every word you say on the internet is being monitored for its toxicity score in terms of how much it violates some blob political shibboleth.
And what's his background? He co-head of Goldman Sachs, Global Institute of Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, that's what he's doing now.
2020 Partners for Manager Private. So president of Global Affairs, and go ahead.
Yeah. So this was a young guy who, and again, I'm not trying to start a personal beef with this, and I can sort of see why he made the decisions that he did, but I think that the fruits of them have resulted in so many of the dystopian shades of life that we now see in terms of the censorship of the internet, at least as it was until Elon freed X and some of the recent changes that Zuck has been making. But Jared Cohen was this young gun who was embedded in a lot of these like Middle East, North Africa, counterinsurgency movements. I think he created movements.org and some of this early stuff in I think the early 2000s. And then he was plucked up to the policy planning staff of the State Department, which coordinates State Department overt action with CIA covert action. And this guy, before I think he was even 30 years old, was he was tapped by the Condoleezza Rice State Department of George Bush, but he was considered, I think, he was kept over by Hillary Clinton in 2009. His big claim to fame there was coming up with this idea of using social media for diplomacy activity. So Facebook was created in 2004, YouTube in 2005, Twitter in 2006. Smartphone in 2007. Jared Cohen gets to the State Department's policy planning staff, which coordinates state and CIA activity, in around 2007. And he looks around and he says, what are we doing running these operations out of U.S. embassies or consulates or CIA station houses? Everyone we want to recruit is on Facebook, is on Twitter, is on YouTube. We can upscale our diplomatic toolkit, our covert action toolkit, our color revolution toolkit by simply leveraging the power of social media. So we need a new doctrine called digital statecraft, or diplomacy 2.0 is some of the branding terms. And this was credited with the crowning achievement of social media diplomacy, the Arab Spring. In from 2010 to 2012, when you had all these Middle East, you had Tunisia, Egypt, all these countries, adversary governments of the Obama administration being toppled in Facebook revolutions and Twitter revolutions. Jared Cohen made a personal phone call to Jack Dorsey while he was at the State Department in 2009 in order to stop Twitter's scheduled maintenance that was going on the week of the Ahmadinejad elections in Iran, because the State Department was running a social media influence operation in Iran to try to influence the course of that election. So the State Department personally interceded on the scheduled maintenance of Twitter just to keep Twitter open. And this is where all this money was flowing into these military connections with the social media companies, because social media was seen as the golden goose for insta-color revolution, insta-regime change operations that could be done at speed, at scale, at a much cheaper cost. You don't need to have 10,000, interlocutors on the ground through a dozen different NGOs in order to mobilize people to take to the streets of the Maidan Square in 2014. You just have a Facebook group which tells everyone to be exactly where they need to be, tells everyone what the slogans are. Everyone can and then you can publicly market off of that because it's a public-facing social media hashtag or a social media, page. We actually funded all these groups with State Department money and USAID money to train them how to use Facebook Twitter hashtags and set up Facebook groups. But then all of this came to a crashing halt when it started to backfire on the foreign policy establishment, when Brexit happened and then Trump got elected on the back of social media. Hi, this is Mike Benz. You can connect with me on Minect for any questions that you have on internet censorship, foreign policy, national security, the Blob, or if you want to know what a particular institution is doing that you may have seen or have questions about in terms of its control over the information ecosystem. So connect with me on Minect.
If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.